Hey guys, just saying Steve here. This is my story of how I relocated from California to Oklahoma. Hopefully this can provide some insight into why I did what I did and why I left California. Sometime in 2012 I hatched an escape plan, but first a little background info about me. I went to school, lots of studying, got a piece of paper, started working, did everything right. When I was commuting on the 405, stuck in traffic, I wondered if this was going to be my next 40 years. One would say I would be having an existential crisis right now, but I didn't buy a Porsche yet. I knew growing up that there was an American dream, and having a mortgage until I die was not part of that dream. The first formidable opponent to this dream of mine was myself and my own lack of ambition. Thus begins my escape plan, and the steady drumbeat signifying my march forward. I've heard a lot of motivational speakers in my youth, but this imbecile talked about Mount Everest, how he told his blind friend to reach the top without him. Then he climbed up to the top anyways. Like the fire of an engine, if I was going to do this, it would be my responsibility and mine alone. With my resolve fully committed to my mission of escaping California, there was no stopping me. My aim had never been more accurate. My main quest was getting work outside of California. While working full-time, I began to work on my resume and apply for jobs. I felt pretty good at this point. I had a purpose, a direction, things were sailing smoothly. Even had some callbacks, did some phone interviews, they flew me out, had a barrage of more interviews. Things were looking good. I played ping pong, all I had to do was wait and have some patience. And then radio silence. After a few months of applying, I knew the fish just weren't biting. I began to apply for jobs for 2 years straight and had just begun to realize the despair of rejection. Something died inside me every time I was constantly rejected. Hope was slowly evaporating. My mental willpower was slowly succumbing to Stockholm Syndrome. I began to accept my fate. And then, out of the blue, descending from the heavens, an offer letter. Salvation awaited me. Congratulations were in order, and cakes were eaten, but I knew my journey had only just begun. My escape plans of a backwards gold rush were finally spawning opportunities outside of my known bubble. Funny thing is, all I knew of the Midwest was the Oregon Trail game I played in elementary school. I knew next to nothing about Oklahoma, only that in the game, most of my party had died of cholera. Here I was headed for Oklahoma. Either I was going to wind up a hobo or be pretty successful. Like Manifest Destiny, my resolve at this point was cemented. I was going to see it through to the end. Sacrifices had to be made moving out of the big city. I had to give up In-N-Out burgers. My dad thought there were only cowboys out in the Midwest and that I'd turn into a cowboy myself. My dad also said people in Oklahoma were next to Texas and they had lots of dangerous guns. It's funny that he's scared of our own Second Amendment right, but that's another story for another time. My friends also thought it was a land of religious wackos and nutjobs with no running water. I had all these opinions about a place nobody had ever visited before. I was out to prove them wrong. I knew in my heart of hearts that most American cities were like other American cities. Although cities had differing population, I'd wager I'll have such luxuries as running water still. Soon afterwards, I began to pack my things. Surprisingly, I didn't have that many possessions. I had goodbye parties, ate lots of party pizza, and bid my farewell to family, friends, and coworkers. To be honest, everybody I knew was against my decision, and they thought I'd lost it, turned crazy. For them, it probably was, but I knew within myself that I'd find what I was looking for moving forward. For those that had supported me, a great thank you for believing in me when nobody else did. At times, it felt like the world was against me, and even I doubted myself. What's interesting is that most Californians never leave their bubble of California. You can't grow this way. My days here were numbered, so I partied out the rest of my days in Las Vegas, gambled away some money at the machines for illogical luck. I knew there were Indian and Native American gambling casinos in Oklahoma. I had this lull in between jobs, so I enjoyed myself, appreciated life for what it is. I sure as heck knew I wasn't going to be a Spider-Man peddling in the streets. My ethos would not allow it. Like a curious cat, I was moving out of the nest for the first time. I knew I was going to mature from this. I bid a final farewell, explained my blueprints for what I was going to do, because I didn't know either. The only major item I had was my car, and I wasn't going to sell it and buy a new one in Oklahoma. I loaded my car to the brim. I was also afraid of CHP pulling me over for safety reasons. And so it came to pass, my Lord of the Rings journey would take me straight across the states into the Midwest. So I had an estimated 3 days drive ahead of me. So, challenge accepted. In my first destination, like Moses, I would cross the deserts of California and endure the blazing inferno of Arizona. So each one of these arrows was around a 400-mile segment, around 8 hours long, and I would drive 200 miles for 4 hours and fill up gas again. And this was to go on for 3 days. When I finally reached Arizona, I realized that from the metropolitan area of California to the next city in Arizona, there was nothing but desert. But even so, the skies were clear and the weather was great, and I was currently embarking on my journey. I want to say that I harmed a lot of insects getting there, so I'd like to have a moment of prayer for all the bugs. As I filled up at a random Shell gas station, I ran through my mental pros and cons, and I knew that Oklahoma had less tax than California. And I also knew that gasoline was a lot cheaper, so in essence, I'd save more money in the long run. I had a lot of time to think while I was driving. I was a lot more worried about my safety on the road than anything else. I was most particularly concerned about getting drowsy and then getting plowed over by a semi-truck. At this point, I was filled with a mixture of emotions: fear, hope, courage, curiosity, but most of all, hope. So, as the sun was setting, I arrived at a sketchy Motel 6 and laid to rest. I found it a little hard to breathe, maybe due to the elevation or I was just tired. Not much rest was had. I noticed that gas was getting considerably cheaper and big brand name shops were disappearing. So began day 2. From here I was on the edge of New Mexico the night before and broke out at first light. To much of my own amazement, I noticed the landscape was changing from dry desert to natural green. 200 miles into the first 4 hours of my trip, I filled up again and ate lunch. The Big Texan was a landmark that my friend told me to visit, and so I did just that. I had relatives in Texas. I was always fascinated by Texas culture. I knew that Oklahoma was not far off from Texas, so maybe that's a good thing. Still contemplating my internal views on political, religious, economic, and financial viewpoints, I got some shut-eye and slept quite soundly that night. Even had a presumptuous attitude. Before I knew it, I was back on the road for the last leg of my journey into Oklahoma. This was the heart of the Midwest. To some it would be Tornado Alley. For me, sanctuary. My car kept track of my miles per gallon throughout the trip. At 40 mpg, I did pretty good. Contrary to my dad's belief that Oklahoma was all cowboys and cattle, I saw a city. I looked around the city for a bit. I signed my first apartment lease here and got the keys, checked the place out. From all the angst and fear of the journey, I was finally here. And a new fear developed. It was a hopeful fear of being on my own for the first time. I had to move everything in my jam-packed car into my apartment and then unpack everything. In a new area with no family or friends, I truly had to learn to fend for myself. Having lived at home for a long time, I had to learn how to cook. I was going to make the best of it. Also, I didn't have a bed, but I did have blankets, and I didn't mind sleeping on the floor. Those first few nights, I constantly questioned what the heck did I get myself into. So I drowned out all these babbling thoughts with some local fried chicken and made some makeshift furniture out of boxes. In the preceding weeks, I had to do all the administrative paperwork associated with a move. Addresses were changed and titles were shifted. I was slowly increasing my level of cooking, and for the first time I was feeling good that I could make it. Contractors came and installed internet, and I was online again. Even played some League of Legends. I even got the rice cooker out and made some rice. That was when I knew I had made it. Not just physically, but mentally. There was more to learn, more to cook, more to see, more to do, more to experience. This was life, and I was living. Life is very interesting. Our reality is what we perceive, and our perception of this reality defines us. I believe in 20 years when I look back, I won't regret any decisions I've made, but I'll marvel at the paths I took. Because life is a series of choices and events. We can either flow with the current, sail against it, or drown. Back to Oklahoma, the culture, I'll say, is just the American culture. There's nothing different about it. People are nicer. Growing up in Southern California, I learned in school that there was this thing called 4 seasons. But in California, this is a lie. There's only one, and that's called sunshine, and 2 days of rain, which in California we call it a flood because we forget to clean the drains. I had my first winter in Oklahoma, and I didn't get to build a snowman that year, not enough snowfall. I also had to buy winter clothes and drive more carefully, but I was enjoying every moment of it. I did prove that Oklahoma was not a backwards rural hick town, but a growing little metropolis, complete with fine dining. In Christianity or Catholicism, every Easter we give up something for Lent. In this case, I gave up the ocean, but I did replace it with lakes. It's funny, for the second time in my life, gasoline actually reached 99 cents again. I know that the road might be rough ahead, and that there are a lot of unknowns down this path, but there were a lot of knowns in safer paths, and I knew where they led. I know for one that I am a far stronger person than I had realized. Maybe I'll travel the world. My bags are already packed. Thanks for listening in. Who knows where I'll be next, but I know my future is forward, and I hope this has helped someone. Thanks.